What if I told you that your entire life is being shaped by something you don't even notice? Something so silent, so automatic, that you are losing or winning your future without even realizing it. Right now, as you watch this, your attention is building something. Not tomorrow, not someday. Right now, every second your mind stays on a thought, a worry, a dream, a distraction. Something is being strengthened inside you. A direction is being chosen. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. You are not moving toward what you want. You are moving toward what you keep looking at. That means your habits, your results, your confidence, even your failures are not random. They are trained by what you repeatedly focus on when no one is watching. Think about it. Why do some people rise while others stay stuck even when they try just as hard? Why do some minds stay clear under pressure while others collapse under the smallest stress? Why do some people see opportunity everywhere while others only see limitation? It all comes down to one invisible force that controls everything you think, feel, and do. Attention. And once you understand how it works, you will never look at your thoughts the same way again, because you will realize that every moment you are not controlling your focus, something else is. This is not about motivation. This is not about positivity. This is about control. Real control over the one thing that silently decides your direction in life. Stay with this message, because what you are about to hear can completely change how you see your past, your present, and the future you are building right now. Attention is not just a mental activity. It is the steering mechanism of human life. The first keynote means that attention is direction, not just focus, and this distinction is what separates passive thinking from active creation. Most people assume that simply thinking about something is enough, but attention goes deeper than thought. It is sustained mental energy aimed repeatedly at a specific target. Whatever consistently holds your attention begins to shape your perception of reality. If your attention is directed toward problems, limitations, and fear, your mind starts organizing information in a way that confirms those patterns. You begin to notice what is wrong more than what is possible, and slowly your decisions start reflecting that limited view. On the other hand, if your attention is directed toward growth, solutions, learning, and opportunity, your mind filters reality differently. It starts highlighting paths, ideas, and chances that were always present but previously ignored. This is why two people can live in the same environment yet experience completely different outcomes, because they are not looking at the same reality with the same focus. Attention also acts like a compass. A compass does not move the traveler by force, it simply indicates direction, and the traveler naturally follows its step B. Why step? In the same way, your attention silently guides your emotions, habits, and choices. When your attention stays on something long enough, your mind assigns it importance, and what feels important eventually becomes action. For example, if someone constantly pays attention to their failures, even casually, their confidence begins to weaken because the mind assumes failure is the dominant pattern of life. But if another person consistently pays attention to improvement, even small progress, their identity starts to shift toward capability and growth. This is not motivational thinking. It is psychological conditioning through repetition of focus. What makes attention powerful is that it works both consciously and unconsciously. Even when you are not actively thinking, your subconscious continues processing what you have repeatedly focused on. That is why persistent attention creates momentum in a specific direction without needing constant effort. It is also why distractions are dangerous, because every moment of scattered attention is a small shift in direction, and over time those small shifts create completely different life paths. In the modern world, attention is constantly pulled in multiple directions, making it easy for people to lose control of their internal compass without realizing it. The result is a life that feels busy but lacks clear movement, where effort exists but direction is unclear, where energy is spent but progress feels inconsistent. What you notice grows stronger in your reality because attention is not a passive recording of life. It is an active selection process that determines what becomes mentally significant and emotionally amplified. The human mind is constantly exposed to far more information than it can consciously process, so it uses attention as a filter to decide what matters. Whatever passes through this filter repeatedly becomes more familiar, more important, and more emotionally charged. In your internal world, This is why two people can experience the same situation but walk away with completely different interpretations. One person may notice failure, rejection, or danger, while another notices lessons, opportunities, or patterns to improve. Neither is fully wrong, but each is reinforcing a different internal reality simply through what they choose to notice and mentally highlight. When something receives consistent attention, the brain begins to strengthen the neural pathways associated with it. This means the more you notice a certain type of thought, emotion, or outcome, the easier it becomes for your mind to find similar examples in the future. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where attention shapes perception, and perception reinforces attention. If someone constantly notices what is missing in their life, their brain becomes highly skilled at identifying lack in every situation. Even neutral events start to appear insufficient or disappointing. This does not mean reality is objectively worse, but the interpretation of reality becomes increasingly filtered through limitation. In contrast, when attention is trained to notice progress, gratitude, and possibility, the mind begins to amplify those elements instead. Small improvements feel meaningful, minor opportunities feel significant, and challenges appear more manageable because the internal focus is aligned with growth rather than deficiency. This process also affects emotional intensity. What you repeatedly notice becomes emotionally familiar, and what is familiar becomes comfortable even if it is negative. For example, if someone continuously pays attention to stress, conflict, or failure, those states begin to feel like normal life conditions. The mind stops resisting them and starts expecting them, which reinforces a cycle of emotional repetition. On the other hand, noticing positive patterns does not mean ignoring reality, but it shifts emotional conditioning toward resilience and possibility. The mind learns to associate experience with expansion rather than restriction. Over time, attention becomes a magnifying force, not because it changes external events directly, but because it determines which parts of those events are expanded, remembered, and emotionally reinforced in daily thinking patterns. Energy follows focus because human action is never random. It is always preceded by internal direction. The mind does not invest effort equally in all possibilities. It naturally allocates energy toward whatever it is consistently focusing on. Focus acts like a channel that directs mental and physical energy into a specific pathway. And once that channel is established, behavior begins to align with it almost automatically. When a person repeatedly focuses on something, whether it is a goal, fear, habit, or idea, the brain starts prioritizing resources toward that area. Thoughts become more frequent, emotions become more intense, and eventually actions begin to reflect that internal emphasis. This is why focus is not just about thinking, but about activation. Whatever you consistently focus on starts pulling energy from your decisions, time, and habits without requiring constant conscious effort. This principle becomes most visible in daily behavior. For example, when someone is deeply focused on improving their health, they begin to naturally adjust their food choices, sleep patterns, and physical activity without needing external pressure. The focus itself creates internal motivation, and that motivation becomes energy in motion. On the other hand, if someone is focused on their problems or limitations, their energy starts flowing into worry, hesitation, and avoidance. They may still want progress, but their focus is feeding a different direction, and energy follows that internal instruction. This is why many people feel exhausted even when they are not physically doing much, because their mental energy is being consumed by scattered or negative focus, which drains their emotional and cognitive capacity. Focus also determines persistence. A strong focus creates emotional investment, and emotional investment generates endurance. When a person is truly focused on a meaningful goal, they are willing to endure discomfort, uncertainty, and delay because their energy is anchored to a purpose. Without focus, energy becomes fragmented and weak, leading to inconsistency and quick burnout. This is why talent alone rarely leads to success without focused energy. Talent disperses and loses direction. Focus concentrates energy like a lens concentrates light, turning scattered potential into powerful action. Even small efforts become impactful when they are directed by clear focus, because the energy is not being divided across multiple competing directions. Over time, whatever receives sustained focus becomes the dominant pattern of behavior. Ire and behavior becomes identity. A person does not rise or fall based on occasional effort. but on where their energy consistently flows. Focus determines what gets priority in the mind, and priority determines where energy is invested, and that investment ultimately shapes results, habits, and the trajectory of personal development in a way that becomes self-reinforcing through repetition and internal alignment. Distraction creates drift because the human mind is not designed to remain neutral. When attention is constantly divided, it naturally moves toward the strongest repeated inputs. And when those inputs are fragmented, direction becomes unstable. In simple terms, when attention is not anchored to a clear purpose, every new stimulus pulls the mind slightly off course. Over time, these small shifts accumulate into a noticeable change in behavior, priorities, and outcomes. Drift does not happen suddenly. It happens gradually through repeated moments of divided focus. A person may feel like they are still trying, still thinking, still planning, but internally their energy is being scattered across too many competing signals, and scattered energy cannot produce consistent progress. Modern life intensifies this condition because attention is constantly interrupted by notifications, comparisons, entertainment, and irrelevant information. Each interruption may seem harmless, but every shift in focus carries a cognitive cost. The mind takes time to reorient itself, and during that reorientation, momentum is lost. When this happens repeatedly, the brain becomes trained to operate in short bursts of attention rather than sustained direction. As a result, deep thinking weakens, decision-making becomes reactive instead of intentional, and progress becomes uneven. Instead of moving steadily toward one meaningful direction, life begins to feel like a series of disconnected efforts that never fully compound into long-term results. Distraction also weakens internal clarity. When attention is pulled in multiple directions, the mind struggles to define what actually matters. This creates a state where priorities feel uncertain, even when goals exist. A person may know what they want at a surface level, but their daily attention does not reinforce that desire. Instead, energy is constantly leaking into unrelated thoughts, comparisons, or impulses. This mismatch between intention and attention creates internal conflict, and that conflict produces fatigue. Mental fatigue then reduces discipline, which makes the person even more vulnerable to further distraction, creating a reinforcing cycle of drift. Drift is not always visible externally. At first, it shows up internally as confusion, inconsistency, and a lack of momentum. People often mistake it for laziness or lack of ability, but it is usually the result of fragmented attention over time. When focus is not protected, direction becomes accidental rather than intent. Instead of choosing where life is going, a person reacts to whatever is most stimulating in the moment. This reactive pattern slowly replaces deliberate action, and life begins to move based on external influence rather than internal control, shaping outcomes that feel misaligned with original intentions and long-term aspirations. Your environment follows your attention because attention is the organizing force that determines what you engage with, what you ignore, and what you gradually attract into your daily life. The environment here is not only physical surroundings, but also people, habits, conversations, opportunities, and emotional settings that repeatedly show up in your experience. What you consistently pay attention to becomes what you participate in, and what you participate in eventually becomes your environment. This process is subtle and often unnoticed because it happens through small, repeated choices rather than sudden changes. When attention is directed toward certain types of content, emotions, or goals, the mind begins to seek out related experiences in the external world, and over time those experiences become your normal reality. For example, if a person consistently pays attention to negativity, complaints, and limitations, they naturally start engaging with environments that reinforce those patterns. They may find themselves in conversations where people discuss problems more than solutions, or in settings where low expectations are accepted as normal. This is not because the environment randomly changed, but because attention shaped perception, and perception influenced choices about where to spend time and energy. Gradually, the external world begins to mirror the internal focus. On the other hand, when attention is consistently placed on growth, discipline, and improvement, a different type of environment begins to form. The person starts noticing mentors, constructive discussions, learning opportunities, and spaces that encourage. Progress. The environment does not change instantly, but alignment develops over time through repeated focus-driven decisions. Attention also influences relationships, which are a major part of any environment. People naturally gravitate toward those who share similar focus patterns. If someone constantly focuses on excuses or stagnation, they tend to connect with individuals who reinforce those beliefs. If someone focuses on ambition and improvement, they begin to attract or seek relationships that support those values. This is not a mystical attraction, but a behavioral alignment. Attention determines what feels familiar, and familiarity determines what feels comfortable, and comfort influences who you choose to keep close in your life. Even digital environments are shaped in the same way. What you click, watch, and engage with train algorithms and habits that reinforce similar content, gradually shaping your informational world. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where attention builds environment, and environment reinforces attention. The more a person repeatedly engages with certain inputs, the more those inputs define their daily emotional climate, thinking patterns, and available opportunities. This is why two individuals with similar external conditions can live in completely different realities, because their attention constructs different environments even within the same physical space. Mastering attention is mastering destiny, because attention is the root control system behind every decision, habit, emotion, and long-term direction of a human life. Destiny is not a sudden event or a fixed outcome. It is the accumulated result of repeated mental focus translated into repeated actions over time. When attention is uncontrolled, destiny becomes accidental, shaped by external influence, impulses, and distractions that constantly redirect behavior. When attention is disciplined and intentional, destiny becomes structured, because every moment of focus is being used to build a specific direction rather than being scattered across competing inputs. This means the quality of a person's life is directly linked to their ability to govern where their mind goes, what it engages with, and what it repeatedly returns to. Attention is powerful because it sits before action. Every action begins as a point of focus, even if only for a moment. What a person consistently notices, thinks about, and prioritizes eventually becomes what they act upon without resistance. Over time, those actions compound into habits, and habits form identity. Identity then determines the type of decisions a person believes are natural or possible for them. This change shows that controlling attention is not just about improving focus in the moment, but about shaping the entire structure of personal development. A person who cannot control attention is constantly rebuilding their direction based on whatever is most stimulating at the time, while a person who can control attention is steadily reinforcing one direction until it becomes dominant. Mastery of attention also determines emotional stability. Where attention goes, emotional energy follows. If attention is constantly placed on fear, comparison, or uncertainty, emotional states become unstable and reactive. If attention is trained toward clarity, solutions, and long-term vision, emotional energy becomes more balanced and purposeful. This emotional consistency strengthens discipline, and discipline is what transforms intention into results. Without control over attention, discipline becomes fragile because the mind is easily pulled away from what matters. With control over attention, discipline becomes natural because focus is no longer constantly interrupted by competing stimuli. Destiny, in this sense, is not something that happens to a person, but something that is continuously shaped through repeated focus choices. Every moment of attention is a small boat toward a future outcome, and the accumulation of those boats determines direction. When attention is mastered, external circumstances lose their ability to fully dictate outcomes because internal direction becomes stronger than external influence. This creates a life where actions are intentional rather than reactive, where progress is consistent rather than accidental, and where long-term direction is defined by conscious focus rather than unconscious drift. And now understand this clearly: your life is not changing because the world is holding you back. Your life changes the moment you decide to control where your attention goes. Every thought you protect, every focus you repeat, every idea you refuse to let go of, these are not small mental habits. They are the quiet forces building your future in real time. So stop giving your attention away carelessly. Stop letting distraction decide your direction. Start guarding your focus like your entire future depends on it, because it does. The moment you take control of your attention, you take control of your emotions, your decisions, your habits, and ultimately your destiny. Nothing outside you becomes powerful enough to define your path when your inner focus becomes disciplined and intentional. You don't need more time. You need more direction. You don't need more motivation. You need more control over what you consistently look at. Because in the end, you will not become what you wish for. You will become what you repeatedly focus on. So choose wisely. Choose deliberately. Choose the direction that builds you, not the distractions that break you. Stay strong, stay focused, and keep moving forward with clarity and purpose. Good luck on your journey. May you master your attention and transform your life from the inside out. Thank you for listening. And if this message spoke to you, make sure to follow my channel, Mind Wealth Theory, for more powerful motivational content that can reshape the way you think, act, and grow.